O te whatalo whatu mo le whaalo le whawhaanga le tino le tai au o le suinga o le tato por kalame pe on whaasisila atu. Ia o leo i le tanoanga ma Barbara Edmonds o mawale avano o ia. Whaia sina pisi o le tato whaipule mai mana. Ia leo o mawale avano mai au kilani talatane noa le por kalame le tai au. Nei whatalo whatu a Barbara ne tai au.
Alofa atu, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm in Auckland today. I've also just got back from London earlier this week, so it's been a big week.
Well, let's start with some of the big events in the city in Wellington. Obviously, you were present in Parliament when everything happened prior to the Hikoi. What's your observation?
Yes, I arrived back from London. I've been in London for a week doing some talks with some global reinsurers for New Zealand's financial stability. I got back on London Monday afternoon. A couple of hours later, I went to Takapawahia Marae down there at the Pā to meet a number of the Hikoi people who are staying at the marae. So all the marae across Wellington region opened their doors for those that were on the Hikoi to stay with them. And then on Tuesday morning, like many in Porirua, I left for work at 5:30 in the morning because the Hikoi started at 6 a.m. And we joined the Hikoi at Waitangi Park. So that's where it started. It was huge. You know, we've seen some numbers from police at around 42,000, but then a data analyst for a local media outlet has actually estimated it at over 80,000. I would agree with that larger number. Every road in central Wellington was just full of people. And as the Hikoi came down, you know, the Golden Mile, so that's from Waitangi down Courtney Place, down Willis Street, down Lambton Quay, it took 2.5 hours for the last bit of the Hikoi to arrive towards the start of Lambton Quay at Bowen Street because it was so full, and all of Parliament grounds there was no room. So it was a massive show of support for tangata whenua, for Māori, against the government for their anti-Māori agenda, and it was a very special hikoi to be a part of.
Yes, one thing that I noticed, or people commented on, it was quite orderly. You know, the hikoi.
Oh, absolutely. So the hikoi organisers were very organised. You have to give them such credit for that, you know, and their communications out to everyone was, it is a kaupapa of rangimarie, which is peace, under the cloak of peace, aroha, and under the banner of Te Atiawa, who was basically Taranaki, which is the local iwi in the area. So it was conducted, there was, I understand, only one arrest. It was more medical events. People, you know, it was a hot day. But the crowd was just so well behaved. And it wasn't just the people on the hikoi, the whole of Lambton Quay, as we came through Lambton Quay, there were people all along the sides with signs, and there was people clapping, and there was people that had come out to see it as it marched past. But it was a very organised event, a very peaceful event, and I just congratulate the organisers for their work to bring together a large part of New Zealand.
Another noticeable thing is that there were a few people from all sorts of you know, backgrounds and supporting this one. They see it as a treaty, as a contract between the Palangis and the Māori. So the Palangis that were march actually felt that they shouldn't even look at this or discuss it.
Yeah, so they would, what Māori would call them as tangata tiriti, so people of the treaty. And it wasn't just Palangi. Like, I saw a lot of Pacific flags there, Niue, Sāmoa, Tonga. There were flags from a lot of our Pacific nations there. But that was the important piece for this, is having that wider support outside of tangata whenua, because it really does show that this is a breach of a contract. And if you want to rewrite that contract in the way that David Seymour is wanting to do through this bill, then you got to consult with the other partner. You can't as a tenant just change the agreement with your landlord by yourself. It has to be with the landlord. So it was very much a strong showing of support by tangata tiriti, tangata whenua, and tangata moana right throughout this whole process. And it wasn't just on the Tuesday, it's been over the whole week as that hiko has come from the top of the North Island.
Yeah, it's a shame that we had to go through all this process given what's national and New Zealand First have said that they only sort of agree to in the first reading, and then they withdraw the support.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We can't depend on their word. You have to put that pressure on. So as part of this hikoi as well, there was a petition around that particular bill. That petition has had almost 300,000 signatures. And so that's more than the ACT party vote, it's that they received in the last election. And it's very much that the pressure has to be put on, but also we didn't need to go there. And it shows the Prime Minister, who says he's a good negotiator, it shows his lack of skills when he negotiated this into the coalition agreement. I mean, I've seen reports that David Seymour said that this wasn't necessarily a bottom line for ACT, but yet the Prime Minister still allowed for this to happen. And so he has to show some leadership. He is the Prime Minister. He is the leader. And that's why it was really disappointing as well, I know for a number of people, that the Prime Minister never showed. He was there in Parliament, but he never showed on the hikoi. I think he would have been given a small seed of respect if he had showed up, but he didn't. There was also heavy security around, National Party MPs and ACT MPs. I mean, to be fair, this was such a wonderful occasion. There was a lot of seriousness, but it was peaceful. And people were there to ensure that the government heard their voice and saw them supporting such an important kaupapa.
Big event, of course, is the Samoan Citizenship Bill. I must be very happy to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we the hikoi, obviously there was a concert afterwards at Waitangi Park. Kamau Sepuloni, myself, we went down and joined some of our other members who were down there. And then the very next day, we had to prepare for the Western Samoan Citizenship Restoration Bill. That again, our Samoan community, they packed out Parliament for it. And, we're always very loud and proud. And it was, again, a very historic moment in which, citizens born during that period would be given back their citizenship. It was some very powerful speeches, there was lots of tears that were shared, this time not just from the National Party MP, Tom Rutherford, but it was, it was a very emotional week, from the hikoi on one day to the passing of that bill in the next, and again, I give my gratitude to my Cook Island brother, Tealu Tui Ono, for his work to progress that. And, he's done what a number of other Pacific MPs have been unable to do over the years, but he did that through trying to ensure, with the help of Jenny Salesa, they knew if they could get New Zealand First support, that this bill would get through.
Interviewed Teanau Tuiono in the morning before the final reading, and I congratulated him and thanked him for doing this for the Samoans. And I was surprised, he's a Cook Islander, and he actually came in and did this for the Samoans.
Yeah, and he was, as part of my speech, I held up a photo of the Overstayers Committee, a special committee for Overstayers issue. And one of the people on there, Richard Pritchard, was actually the uncle of one of Tiano's friends that basically said to Tiano, you have to do this for our people. So that sort of, Tiano is a very well-respected member of Parliament. He is our Assistant Speaker. when I was asked yesterday as to why, previous governments had not done this, in particular Labour Party governments, I could only really speak to the 10 months in which I was a minister. And Tiano approached me about this particular issue and asked, would I support it? And I said, I'm absolutely open to it. But he needed to go speak to the Samoan government first, to lay that foundation so that we'd support the members' bill. Unfortunately, we ran out of time because the election came through. But as part of my own research into this particular bill, or this act, when it was passed in 1982, I looked at the old records of Hansard and what was said in Parliament at the time. And some of the members of Parliament at the time had reflected on their concerns from the Samoan government about the loss of, a really key workforce and age demographic at the time. So, it showed that we had to make sure that the homework had been done. So it was really wonderful to see, Afamasaga, the obviously the High Commissioner to New Zealand, at the event afterwards at the St. Paul's Cathedral across the road from Parliament. So it's a small win. As Arthur and I would say, there's more work to do. Chris Hipkins and Carmel Sepuloni in their speeches at that third reading speech reading said they too would be supportive of more work if the government was to undertake that, because now that the government's in power, they need to do that work. So we would be supportive of looking at the other issues that surround this particular issue, in particular around the descendants and the other word around visas, around that visa flow.
There was an amendment put in by the New Zealand First to refund the application fee. But I thought, why did they even ask for application fee when they're given a citizenship?
Yeah, it was interesting debates that had happened during the select committee process and also after it, because even Labour had put through amendments around descendants as well. But what it ultimately came down to, and we have to be respectful that it is Te Ano's bill, is that he wanted to ensure there was full support for the legislation going through. So it is a matter around the refundability of the fee. In the select committee report, it shows that the minority parties, which is Labour and the Greens, fought for it not to be applied at all because their citizenship was stripped from them. But the advice that obviously the government got was that the fee had to apply. But it's good to see that the amendment for the refund has come through. I've just seen on the Department of Internal Affairs website today that more information about how you can apply for that citizenship will be available next Tuesday.
Very good. Now, let's come back to your trip to UK. The reinsurance, what was that about? Because with all the climate change events, and obviously it's costing a lot of money. So this reinsurance, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're absolutely on the money there, Afamasaga. So New Zealand is a really highly insured country. So, when you take out your mortgage, the bank tells you get an insurance for your house. The issue that has happened is because New Zealand has a lot of events. So, last year we had Cyclone Gabriel, we had the floods in Auckland, we've had a number of natural disasters. We are also on one of the most riskiest the Ring of Fire, here in the Pacific. We are the second highest risk behind Japan. And so the concern for me, and something that in my discussions with both the insurance companies, is that it will get to a point because of climate change, because we're going to get more of these downpours and these floods, that people will be unable to afford their insurance. Because what happens is that the insurance companies, they will have more information. They will go to risk-based pricing. So currently, everyone in the community, this cost is spread across the community. But as more information happens, it becomes more unfair for the rest of the community to have higher premiums. So therefore, they move to this risk-based pricing. It therefore can become unaffordable for some people. And ultimately, if this happens more and more and we face a natural disaster, then that's a fiscal risk on the government, because someone's going to have to be there to rebuild these communities. So I've picked it up as a risk as part of my finance spokesperson role. Through an invitation from the New Zealand Insurance Council, so that's Chris Farfoy, my friend, and my friend of Mana, who's the chief executive. They extended an invitation for me to come to London with them and some of their members of their board, some of the CEs from the larger insurance companies here in New Zealand, to join them for discussions with the reinsurers. Now, insurance companies here in New Zealand are also insured by big global companies offshore. So in those discussions, spoke to the reinsurers about how they see New Zealand, how they are pricing the risk for New Zealand, or the perils or the disasters, and what can a future government do, or what should a government be doing to give them assurance that we are doing all that we can to help bring those premiums, put downward pressure on those premiums.
Polluters should be contributing towards paying the premiums.
Yeah, and I think that's a policy discussion that's happening right across the world. But also because of New Zealand signing up to the Paris Climate Change Agreement back in 2014, a lot of the climate requirements which countries have signed up to will come into force at the end of this decade. And so for me, as a future finance person, I'm looking at all the different costs that our country may be facing, and that is one of them. But the other interesting thing is that a lot of these big corporates are starting to now realize that they have to change as well, because them too will be getting more taxes and more levies from pollution. So one of the big things that's happened is that over 80% of New Zealand's exports, where our exports, our meat, our milk, our products go to, 80% of the world, 80% of that market in the world, they're requiring us the exporter to basically calculate the emissions, calculate how much the carbon is being emitted from making their product. And so that reflects back on those bigger corporates on their books. So as a result of that, some behaviour change is needed. It also requires governments to put that pressure on as well. So, for example, for the farming, agriculture, farming is one of our largest emitters behind, obviously, with transport. The government basically removing and not basically giving some reprieve in this area, that doesn't really help them, because in the end, the exporters where they're going to will require them to do so. So they can't really sit back on their laurels, and that's come out through both the Reserve Bank recent reports, as well as one of the larger farming banks who sort of called it out, which is like, we still need to help our customers shift to a lower emissions.
Let's come back to your electorate here in Porirua, Mana. There was a launch on the 31st of October for the Pacific Housing Project. See that going through?
Oh yeah, I'm really proud of that project. I was in the room with Inu Pereira when he was making his case to Aupito Sua William Seal at the Ministry of Pacific Peoples. I was in the room for that very first meeting, in which Aupito gave his approval for a business case to be drafted for this. Obviously through budget, we committed, when we were in government, we committed, over $100 million towards not just this project, but so $49 million for the houses alone, but also for the infrastructure. You can't build those houses unless you fix that infrastructure. So for those here in Mana, if they've been down Champion Street, they'll see that there's been a lot of work down Bottomley Park. That's where $136 million has gone towards, because there's a really big sewer pipe there that when it rains, it leaks raw sewage into the creek that goes into the harbour. So there was no way that the council would give consent for an additional 300 homes up in Castor Crescent without that pipe being fixed. So, that was money that was given under a Labour budget. It's been a full-on 3 years for the Aufale Pacific Central Pacific Collective project. But they got here, and it was a wonderful event to mark that occasion. And so I'm very proud of what's happened. Yes, Labour government was not there to, put the shovels in the ground, but that doesn't matter in the respect that our community knows who supported them to be able to do this. And also, for me, it's about the houses. That's more important than taking credit for anything around who funded what, who should who should cut the ribbon. It's more important we get these houses because it's a good project and it's one that's going to really support some of our families.
Giving you a spade so you can shovel a bit of dirt as an
Yeah.
MP for.
Well, my hands have already been dirty from that project, so it's a lot more than just showing up for a picture with a spade. It's more about the work that started from that day one and supporting that business case through to that we got the money for it.
Today you're presenting to the US Summit. Do you want to share part of what's happening there, please, Barbara?
So the US Summit has been held for 3 years now. This is the 3rd year in a row that it's been held. It's a one-day summit. We're basically supported through the American Chamber of Commerce that is based here in Auckland, the University of Auckland, facilitated by Fran O'Sullivan, who is a very senior, very experienced journalist and very active within foreign affairs, etc. So the summit brings together different people to discuss, basically what's happening in the US and trade. So it's very timely, given that the US election was earlier this month. There'll be different panelists. There'll be different panelists speaking, including myself. I will be on a panel around how New Zealand can attract more foreign investment later on this afternoon, but other panels around what are the potential areas of growth that would attract American investment and migrants to New Zealand. For example, Professor Dalwin from the University of Auckland will be talking about space or aerospace. New Zealand is in a very particular position that we have some of the best airspace in the world in order to launch what they call payloads or rocket ships, those sorts of things into space. So there's huge potential for growth as a result of that. And when I say growth, it means jobs, and it means investment back into our local economy.
I was just thinking with Donald Trump coming in January next year, and he's already talking about sort of tariffs, imposing tariffs for imports or our export into. So that obviously will be part of the discussion, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of Donald Trump's policy platforms during the election. He's looking at around a 60% tariff on Chinese goods, roughly around a 10 to 30% tariffs on other goods. Into the US is our second largest export market. So it is a big deal if tariffs are put on New Zealand products. Around 80% of the products that are sent to the US is meat. So that's a really big area that the meat industry has to be very close to and very aware of, and that's where the government and trade officials need to be really sharp and on the ball and have a close relationship with the US to ensure the impact of such tariffs, if they go ahead, because it's not yet law, if they go ahead, that they prepare both New Zealand exporters to diversify or to in fact be able to how they're going to carry this cost or how that flows into pricing onto US citizens. So it's it's going to be a very interesting year to see how that policy rolls out, but that's why this US summit's a really good chance to be able to have those discussions here in New Zealand.
Is there a China summit similar to the US summit in New Zealand?
Well, we have a free trade agreement with China. So it means that our goods are traded, tariff free for the majority of them. So it's, for a lot of, there's different settings for different types of goods. But, that's why it's important that our government officials are there and ministers having those discussions with US officials and ministers, once Donald Trump is in next January, because that's when his inauguration will be next January. That's why it's really important that they're there right from the beginning, given the big impact on New Zealand exporters.
So you're busy trying to keep up with your role as a spokesperson, finance spokesperson for Labour. You also got the electricity in mana that you can try and keep, working on. How's that going?
Yeah, well, I've always said, you start work in your electorate on day one after you're elected. That's 4 years ago for me, or just over 4 years ago, around this time. So that's why it's important that you do that work so that when you're not there, your people understand that you're still there supporting them, but it's just that you're also trying to support the country. It is a very big role. But I mean, we have a really good team. I'm really proud of the work that our team has done over the last 4 years to establish those connections. Again, we're hopefully opening our office in Kapiti, another new office next year, early next year. But it's one of those things, I'm really conscious of it, a bit like my family. You get a bit of guilt when you're away from home, but there is a bigger cause here. And the fact is, this is the first time Mana has had someone that's been the spokesperson for finance, and it's a huge opportunity for our electorate. And I'm hopeful people will forgive me if I haven't been able to come to many events, but it's one of those things. I still wear my MP for Mana proud first before anything else.
Very island lady, may I say, to be a spokesperson of finance in a political party.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in particular, that's the added pressure as well. But again, I mean, I take that all with me. You don't take away your heritage and your ancestry. That's with me wherever I go. So whether it's be in London, here in Auckland, or in Porirua and Mana, it's a wonderful thing, but it carries a big responsibility.
You got the prayers of all your community and the Samoans with you, Barbara, to help you with your work. Some comments or final message for your community?
Yeah, Mike, to our community, I'm very proud of the support and advocacy that you did around the Western Samoan Restoration Bill. That is very much a win for our community, and not really the politicians. It really is the community work and advocacy that got that bill through. Secondly, in my speech as part of that bill, I asked our tangata moana to continue to stand in solidarity or stand together with tangata whenua around the Treaty Principles Bill. It has only just started, that Treaty Principles Bill. Please go and submit. We need to support tangata whenua because we are here in New Zealand because of their graciousness, because of their ability to allow New Zealand to sign a treaty with the Crown back in 1840. So it's really important that we reciprocate and show our support for what is a very, very hurtful and deeply disappointing issue for them, in the same way that we were upset with the Western Samoan Citizenship Act. It's the same way that we should be upset around the Treaty Principles Bill. It is some very big decisions that are being made without having the forefront or the sight to be concerned about the people that it affects. And it's a very heavy burden for our Māori people. And so I ask that our people continue to support them.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Barbara. And you have a good day and weekend.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Whakataitele lava mole awanoa.
Mole nei, whāsui fua.
Whāsui fua.
Ia, o tātou tanoanga na ma Barbara Edmonds ia pe au na iei fo tātou nanga masani whapea male whaipuli. Whamalulua tu e tu wale avano I tala no mamta upule na whatulanga matala no iei. Ia on tam whaile ia whaaliliu tātou tanoanga le ma watua ia whamtalanga stem mumua. Iei le polkalamil afoleiva le la tala no atua nisi o vaenga ingan Sāmoa polkalamil tae o nei. Ia nei vo le sistemi tam whaile I Sāmoa umale tō le tele o vaenga nei. Ia na to e watua e whaile o sistanoanga I se taimi o mumua.